This is Jason Newton, here along the route of the Old Connecticut Path on our journey of rediscovery. Today's chapter begins here in Nye Holman State Forest in Tolland, Connecticut. The Old Connecticut Path crosses the Willimantic River here in Nye Holman State Forest. As we stand here on the banks of the Willimantic River and look upstream, we have to use our imagination of the time before bridges that spanned the river here as a place that was a crossing point of trails that led west towards Hartford and Windsor and Wethersfield. Here in Nye Holman State Forest, the Willimantic flows through a wide floodplain, allowing the river to spread out to form a shallow crossing area for fording the river. And as we look downstream, we can see that the river at this point in low water is shallow, and the banks, because it's a part of a floodplain, are low to the river, making entrance to the river for those on foot and exit as they cross to the other side easier. The highways of today cross and meet in this area, and they're all overlaid and make the process of identifying the location of the Old Connecticut Path a bit of a challenge, but we'll see if we can untangle the mystery of the route of the Old Connecticut Path through here and see if we can find some traces along the way. For those who come to Nye Holman State Forest, today you can walk along the Willimantic River through the state forest and visit the places where the Old Connecticut Path may have crossed. It's likely that the exact location would never be known because the river here in the floodplain keeps shifting position. And that made it a challenge for the early settlers of this area. And in 1727, Ebenezer Nye, who established his homestead here on the banks of the Willimantic, built a bridge across the river that led to Willington going east, and the roadway continued from here going west towards Tolland Center. And this roadway may form the base of the route of the Old Connecticut Path as one of the earliest roadways through Tolland and on towards the Connecticut River Valley. So from here at one of the early bridge sites crossing the Willimantic, we're going to head uphill following the Park Road here in Nye Holman to attempt to cross over and locate pieces of the old route that would be the Old Connecticut Path. Now, if you had followed the Park Road and Perro Road back up to Route 74, you'd be wondering where would the trail go from here. It's a series of ledges that look like obstacles that are insurmountable along the way. But if we return back just a short distance down Perro Road, we see the evidence of the ancient roadway heading on uphill towards Tolland. The path veers off and follows the contour of the land uphill towards the highway. So we'll walk forward and see where our path leads next. As we near the highway, we can see the route of the path crosses the highway, but it would not be evident to those who travel here today. The deep cut here of Route 74 to make the modern highway downhill to the Willimantic removed the traces of the Old Connecticut Path and the old roadway as it was mapped unshown on the early 1946 topographic map. So the route continues west from here, and we'll attempt to pick it up just a little further on. We've ascended to the top of the ledges above Perro Road by traveling through the Nye Holman State Forest, which provides a wonderful place for walking with access from South River Road here in Tolland. And we've reached the point where we're at the boundary of the state forest, and private land lies just beyond here, and within 100 feet beyond the boundary of the private land runs the old roadway. As we look out across the field here, we can see running between the garages and the farm implements, the route of the old roadway heading west. As we walk through this mixed hardwood forest and the openness of it, from descriptions of the early years in colonial time when the first English arrived, they marveled that walking through the woods was much like this, walking through a park, because the natives had burned over the land to keep the woodland open for grasses to grow, for the game to feed on, and to also keep it clear so that they could travel through without fear of attack, without warning. As we continue west, we approach the Interstate 84 right-of-way, and we can take a moment to take a view back at the colonial roadway that was here, that likely was built upon the preferred route of the Old Connecticut Path. There may have been several different ways to come up the hill through the woods here to head towards Tolland, but over time this may well have been the route that was most favorable to be converted to a roadway. And so we see, lined by stone walls here, the pathway. As we continue on our way west on this old roadway, we can see the old stone walls that line the right-of-way, and they're separated by, maybe 100 feet. And as we come up here, there appears to be an intersection of another ancient road that joined on here, that's now been cut by the construction of Interstate 84. But by the alignment of this, looking at it on a map, it's possibly the connector to the Buff Cap Road leading up Buff Cap Hill here in Tolland. Now through the woods here we can hear the traffic on Interstate 84 coming through pretty loudly. That the route west is following the modern highway closely. As we come around the bend here, we can see the impact of modern construction upon this ancient route, that we're approaching the right-of-way of the Interstate 84, and the old route appears to have gone about to the middle of what's modern Route 84, and then turned and come back around. So we'll see if we can pick it up a little further up across Grapevine Brook. So we can see that the fill required to build the highway is probably 50 feet, 60 feet high above the level of the brook. And the original roadway would have come across likely right about where the highway is. So if you are traveling east or west on Interstate 84, you're likely to have traveled for one moment on the Old Connecticut Path. As we've come across Grapevine Brook, we'll follow the perimeter of the highway for just a short distance. We come back across to once again beyond the old roadway here in Nye Holman Forest. Now this section of the path was visible in the 1934 aerial view, so it does cause me to believe that it predated the highway construction and provides a way for traversing the climbing of the hill. We've now reached the end of our line here on the south side of Interstate 84 in Nye Holman State Forest. Now as we look back downhill, we can see the course of the old roadway as it worked its way back up the hill here to make it easier for those who are traveling with wagons in the colonial era to make it up the grade. Now, as we stand here, one of the things to notice that's part of the genius of the laying of the pathway across this distance of wilderness is that here we are on the south side of the hill. And this is a winter's day, so we can see how bright it is here as opposed to the north side of the hill, which would allow for the pathway or road here to be open longer during the year. The snow would melt sooner in the spring, and the road would stay clear later in the fall, here on the south side, taking advantage of the sun's warming rays. like to say we flew over Interstate 84, but in actuality we took the safe way to this point where we can pick up the route of the Old Connecticut Path. We're right at the point where if you were headed east on I-84, you'd be getting ready to turn off at exit 69 for Route 74. So let's turn and continue our journey west towards Tolland on the old roadbed here in Nye Holman State Forest. Come down around the bend, you can see that we're picking up the line of an ancient roadway here, and we're coming up to a small seasonal stream that's crossed by it looks like a buried box culvert. If we get down here, we'll be able to take a look. Yeah, as we come around, you can see it's pretty well buried over at this point over the course of centuries, but the water still flows under the culvert rather than coming up over the roadway. So we'll continue on our walk west from here, heading uphill back in the direction we've traveled. You can see in the distance through the forest here, you can see the cars of Route 84 going right by, parallel to this route of the Old Connecticut Path. And we'll turn and continue the last little bit of this portion in Nye Holman, coming up the hill, and we can see in the distance an American flag, so we'll see where this comes out. As we come through the edge of the woods and enter a grassy plain, we arrive at the Troop C barracks of the Connecticut State Police. Now the route of the path would have crossed right through the back corner of the State Police barracks area here. And this is all part of state land in the Nye Holman State Forest. And in some respects, as you think about it, it's really fitting that here on the Old Connecticut Path stands the place where those who go out to protect travelers along the new ways in Connecticut have their base. So their troop is truly located in a place of history. The Old Connecticut Path leaves the Connecticut State Police grounds on the far corner of their land here and re-enters the woodland of Nye Holman Forest. The old path comes uphill and meets with a, shall I say, more modern version of the roadway that comes up from South River Road. Now, both lines follow together for a short distance, and then the old path diverges to continue on its way towards Tolland Center. We've reached a point in our walk where the more modern cutoff road heads off to Route 74, and approximately following the boundary markers of Nye Holman, we head west on what appears to be the old and ancient roadway. And this ancient roadway is well marked by the yellow bands of the state forest boundary, which also suggests that the roadway ran here as roads were often used as the boundaries when properties were surveyed. And as we follow the trail into this corner of Nye Holman State Forest, we can see the roadbed along the stone wall here. We see ahead of us the modern development of houses here in this area outside the state forest along Evergreen and Amy Drives here in Tolland. There is no direct cut through at this point because the line of the old road has been cut with the modern housing development here. So we'll go around and pick it up on the other side of Evergreen Drive. It would have been much easier if I were able to fly over Evergreen Drive, as there's no direct connection. But we have walked around to connect with the continuation of the path here on the west side of Evergreen Drive. And we'll turn and walk downhill on the old roadway leading west towards Tolland. As we head west along this route, we can see that this section has been out of use for a much longer period of time than the portions we've followed east of here. There's more small brush and undercover here taking over the route of the old roadway, but we're still able to follow it as there's a clear line that is consistent with the line of travel depicted on the 1934 aerial photo that showed the route as it traveled west. As we come down the trail, we're passing through land that longtime resident of Tolland, Madeline Regan, gave an interview to describe her family's experience owning this land for over 100 years. And she recalled in her memory of the years she spent here on this land, of the stories of her mother and grandmother traveling through the woods here to collect wild mushrooms and hickory nuts and chestnuts here in the woodland. They were able to walk the full distance from here on down past the land on Evergreen to cross where the state police barracks is now located, on downhill to the Willimantic. As we come downhill, Madeline recorded that here on this small stream that runs down to the Scungamog River, there was a bridge, and there currently is logs going across, but there was also a sawmill here for cutting the timber that was taken from this land, and that the oak and chestnut trees from here were cut and used locally for homes built here in Tolland. As we head uphill along the path, we can further recall from Miss Regan's from her interview that she was delighted to learn in 1982 they had a land survey done and discovered that this place that she'd walked all her life and that her parents and grandparents walked was an ancient highway that was the pathway followed by Thomas Hooker on the way to Hartford. Our journey along this portion of the old and ancient pathway is nearing the end as we approach Route 74 and the modern road leading towards Tolland. But before heading on to Tolland Center, let's stop for a moment to consider the words of Madeline Regan before she passed away, describing the time in her life spent here in these woods. That she said, "A quiet walk in my woods, observing and listening to the sights and sounds of nature brings peace and tranquility to body and soul." Madeline Regan hoped that this piece of land that was part of her family and her life and the history of Connecticut would someday be preserved as a place for others to come to enjoy as she did. We've traveled a little over a quarter mile up Route 74 from the place where the old path comes out to the modern highway. And here before us is the Scungamog Brook. Looking down the brook, we can see that this was once a place of industry in early Tolland, as there was a mill dam here and mill site right on the brook. Just beyond the Scungamog Brook, the route of the path, I believe, leaves the highway following Torrey Road over the hill to Tolland Green. Our route today has brought us from the Willimantic River at Nye Holman State Forest, following the old and ancient roadway leading to the center of Tolland. The roadway was built upon the route that would be most likely followed by the Old Connecticut Path. Those early travelers followed an ancient Indian path that provided a sure way to lead them safely to their new homes along the Connecticut Valley. The route from here leads west past Polk Hill to the point where the waters of streams flow down to the Connecticut River. The travelers on the Old Connecticut Path would have felt a sense of elation, I'm sure, knowing that they were close to their new homes in the Connecticut Valley. For more information about our travels today and the Old Connecticut Path, please visit the Old Connecticut Path website.